Hello there. I'm going back to a report in the Daily Mail on the 18th of May 2017. I believe this was the first report which mentioned that a police investigation was starting at the Countess of Chester Hospital. And then this report was repeated in many other newspapers and on the BBC, etc., on their website. So there's an excerpt from this report, and I'll link it below, and it says the following. Justine Jones, a clinical negligence lawyer for Slater and Gordon in Chester, who is representing the parents of several babies who died, said, quote, "The hospital has taken the highly unusual step of calling in the police to investigate these deaths, which will come as a shock to the families." Close quote. I'd like to ask a series of questions about this in this video. The first question is, are the parents represented solely parents of babies that later form part of the indictment? Or are some of these parents of babies whose deaths were not deemed to have been deliberate? Question 1A is, why did the parents challenge what the hospital were telling them up to the point of seeking legal representation? What did the consultants and the hospital tell them regarding the deaths of their children? What did the hospital, the consultants, and possibly NHS legal representatives tell the parents who are being represented there, and then tell their solicitor up to the point of May 2017? Question 2. For the parents represented, what had the hospital told them up to that point? I know that's a repeat there, but there's a slight difference, which led them to seeking representation from a solicitor. What was it about what they'd heard and been told, which told them, well, we've got to get a solicitor now to represent us. We're not happy with what they're telling us. And what else did the parents know or suspect with regard to their own babies in relation to what they had seen or heard or been told by the hospital? Seen or heard at the time, leading up to the deaths or just after the deaths, told by the consultants, told by nurses, seen with their own eyes, heard from other people. And what had they been told from the hospital ever since that period? Question 3. Clearly the hospital have not up to that point, up to the point of the police investigation starting, which is being announced in this article, they've not told anything to the parents which suggests anything to do with deliberate harm. So in that case, how had they explained the deaths up to that point, or sought to explain them up to May 2017 to those parents, which in some instances could be a period of almost 2 years from the earliest deaths in what ends up being called the indictment period, the earliest deaths taking place in June 2015. So there can be possibly were parents represented by this solicitor who have been in communications about the deaths of their children since 2015, potentially. That's a long period of time. And it's reached the point that parents have a solicitor representing them now. What's happened over that whole period? And what have the hospital been telling the parents and then the solicitor? What was it about what the hospital had told the parents that led them to seek legal representation. They obviously weren't accepting of what the hospital had told them. There's something about what they've been told to that point, or what they knew and saw and heard or suspected themselves up to that point, which made them seek legal representation against the hospital vis-à-vis the treatment, standard of medical care. What was it that the parents suspected or knew were deficits of care, and wouldn't and didn't let that go right up to May 2017, to the point that the police investigation essentially forced them to let it go, because it reframed the interaction between the parents and the hospital, or it put that on ice. It put that process on ice. It stopped it. It stalled it, and it stopped it. Well, I presume it stopped it for the parents of babies that end up on the indictment sheets, in terms of they're listed as deliberate harm. But we don't know, in terms of the parents being represented there in relation to deaths over that period, are also parents represented in which eventually, as a result of the investigation, no deliberate harm is suspected. So what is it about what the hospital had told the parents that led them to seek legal representation up to that point? And presumably something in relation to medical or clinical negligence of some kind. Otherwise, why are they going to a solicitor? And why has the solicitor taken it on if there's nothing there in terms of clinical or medical negligence? Question 4. As a number of the parents are already represented in May 2017, there'll be some repetition here because I just did a bit of a blast through what I'm thinking here about this issue. As a number of the parents are already represented in May 2017 by a solicitor, what information about the deaths had the hospital supplied to the solicitor from the hospital itself, and also engaging with the consultant and other people involved in the care of those babies? And had it come through the hospital's own legal department? What was their position? What was the consultant's, and thereby the hospital's, and thereby the hospital's legal department's position regarding those deaths up to that point? What reasons had the hospital given for the deaths to the parents? Had they conveyed to the parents initially, and then to the parents via their solicitor, that the deaths were explainable and expected? So deaths that end up being deemed unexplainable and unexpected, other than by deliberate harm by Evans, and presumably, so we hear, en route by the consultants, hence all their suspicions, were they at the same time telling the parents that the deaths were explainable and or expected, that there were reasons for them, for those deaths? And another reason to do this video now is, I think, crucially, if that is the case, that there were explanations given for those deaths by the consultants and therefore by the hospital as a whole to those parents to stall any legal action against the hospital. So they were making a justification and giving explanations. Crucially, can any of those explanations given over that period of time, initially to the parents and then to the parents via their solicitor, can they be accessed now by Lucy Letby's current legal defence, by Mark MacDonald's team? Question 5. If the hospital were telling the parents represented a set of reasons why their children died, what were those reasons? What were those reasons given at that time? And how can their reasons given over the period since the deaths occurred, which could be up to 2 years before May 2017, could go right back to, obviously, June 2015. What were those reasons? And how can the reasons given by the hospital, or by the hospital's legal team, or by their consultants, in letters directly to the parents over that period of time, how can those reasons be accessed by Lucy Letby's current legal team? Can they be accessed by Lucy Letby's current legal team directly from the solicitor, Slater and Gordon, or potentially from the parents themselves if they were willing to discuss this, to discuss what had happened en route and what they'd been told by the hospital? Question 6. If some of the parents represented in 2017 were parents of babies that do not form part of the indictment, what was the outcome in those cases? So these are deaths that Evans apparently very quickly deems explainable and expected, and therefore do not form part of the charge sheet against Lucy Letby. But is it possible that some of the parents represented by Slater and Gordon in 2017 were parents of babies that sadly died, that were not part of the indictment? But what was the outcome of those cases then? Was there local resolution, or were there settlements made for medical negligence or error or failures of care in those cases, despite them being as part of the investigation and, according to Evans, explainable and expected? If so, if there was some local resolution or even some medical negligence settlements made in relation to those cases, i.e. cases not on the indictment, how would this change the picture of how the consultants and how the Countess of Chester Hospital as a whole wish to represent what that neonatal unit was like over the period in question, 2015 to 2016? I.e. that there were other cases eventually settled that not part of the trial or the indictment, but cases of other medical failures. Is that possible? Question 7. In the same article from the Daily Mail, the parents of baby Noah also appear, because they tell the story of baby Noah, and as obviously it's resolved and there's been an inquest, and it's been judged that the hospital was at fault. So in the same article, the parents of baby Noah, baby Noah sadly passed away in 2014, and was never any part of any indictment with respect to Lucy Letby. It's a separate matter. The parents of baby Noah also appear to welcome the police investigation. They say it's a good idea. They're asked for comment. But presumably, well, without a doubt, the inquest has been completed in their case, and the cause of the death of their son has been established, i.e. by May 2017, as being medical negligence. Medical negligence by Dr. B and another doctor whom she was supervising. With that in mind, on what basis are those parents, advocating a police investigation or supporting one? Are they doing it not so much with regard to thinking that a nurse is responsible for deliberate harm, or anyone else, whether it's a nurse or whomsoever, that it's about murder, but that it's about negligence, as in their case, the idea of corporate manslaughter? So Is it rather that, rather than any idea that there's any deliberate harm being caused, or that any deliberate harm has been caused, as opposed to corporate manslaughter or medical negligence to such a degree that it should involve the police? Is that their reason for welcoming the police investigation? Question 8. Justine Jones's statement that the hospital calling in the police to investigate would come as a shock, that's the word that's used, it would come as a shock, suggests that up to that point the hospital had been offering medical explanations as to why the babies died to the parents. They'd been saying something to them. They hadn't been saying nothing to them. The consultants initially to those parents, and then the hospital represented by management, had been speaking to those parents over that period of time, and then speaking to their legal representative as well, at whatever point they became involved. They'd not been saying nothing to them. They'd been saying something to them. So presumably, up to that point, they'd only been offering medical explanations as to why the babies died to the parents, and then to the parents via their solicitor. So I've written here, initially to the parents directly, and then to their legal representative. What were these explanations? It would suggest that such explanations up to that point would justify the deaths as explainable and or expected, i.e., neither the hospital nor the doctors were at fault. If so, was this in contradiction to what the consultants say they were thinking and documenting throughout and after the 2015-2016 period, i.e. with the drawer of doom and the whispering of about a murderer on the ward, essentially the gossip about it. And yet 7 of the deaths are then deemed later unexplainable and unexpected by the police investigation via their quote-unquote expert Dr. Evans. So how do the Dr. Evans's findings contradict or otherwise match with what the parents and then what their solicitor, the solicitor representing those parents, had been told by the hospital up to May 2017? And the final question to wrap it up, which is a reiteration really, is can Mark MacDonald's team, Lucy Letby's current legal team, gain any form of access to any of these interactions between the hospital and the parents, and then between the hospital and the parent solicitor, between the earliest deaths in June 2015 and up to the point that the police investigation comes in May 2017? Can they gain any access to any communications? Can they gain any information, potentially from the parents even, as to what the hospital were telling them, or from Gordon and Slater, the solicitor? I think if that were possible, I think that could open up a lot of very interesting information as to what the hospital were telling the parents over that period of time leading up to May 2017, and the fact that they've sought out legal representation. They weren't satisfied with what they were being told. What were they being told? And then what was the solicitor told up to May 2017? Thank you very much, and have a good day there.